Good morning, guys. We tend to take our access to water for granted. Yesterday, the United States Drought Survey released this map of data indicating where in the United States they're having a drought. Now, a drought is when an area gets less than the normal amount of rainfall. Normal is what we need to replenish our aquifers to make sure we have enough water for all the things that we use water for. And as you can see, in some areas it's yellow, which means it's less than average and it's a mild kind of a drought. And then you have the red, which means extreme drought. And some areas have, and this is something that we need to be concerned about. Water when we need it. It comes out of a faucet, right? Well, there's a lot of places in the world that don't have access to water. We call this water inequality. That means that either they don't have access to actual water or they don't have access to water that they can use, water that's drinkable, water that's safe for them. And there are two reasons for this: contamination or access to water. One of our big news items this week was the brain-eating amoeba that killed a 6-year-old boy in Texas. Now, this was something that happens very rarely, but it does happen. Sometimes you have microorganisms that get into the water supply and they can make you sick. In this case, there was a brain-eating amoeba that somehow got into the boy's body, into his brain, and ate his brain. Just because you don't see something doesn't mean that it's not there. In fact, there's lots of microorganisms in fresh water that you have to be careful of. We treat our water before we drink it. I went to a reservoir not too long ago and brought back some water, checked it out under a microscope, and found all these organisms. Went to the ocean recently too, brought back this water, and I found these organisms. Water really needs to be processed before you can drink it. Sometimes it's particles floating in the water, maybe some dirt, maybe some bits of wood. Sometimes it's actual living things, microorganisms. The danger from these microorganisms can be as simple as diarrhea or as significant as dying from a brain-eating amoeba. If you live in a city, your local water supply is treating your water before they send it to you. They're trying to get rid of particles and microorganisms, and there's steps to this process. First, they add chemicals that will stick to the chunks of things in the water, and they will sink, removing those things from the main water supply. Second, they're going to filter the water to remove any extra large particles that are remaining floating around, so you put it through a filter. And then finally, there's disinfectants. Disinfectants are intended to kill the microorganisms that remain. Access to water is a problem also. When I go camping, I like to take along this big jug here. I carry this to the local water faucet, and I try to bring back as much water as I can in a single trip. If I bring back only a little bit of water, I know I have to make several trips to the faucet during the course of a day. If I bring back a lot of water, I only need to make maybe one trip, but it sure is heavy and it's hard to carry. If you live in a city, you probably have pipes running to your home that deliver you water. If you live away from a major city, you might be using well water. Well water is where you dig a hole in the ground deep enough to reach the groundwater, and then you pump that water up to use. Sometimes that well runs dry. Sometimes that water is contaminated. Changes to the water supply of an ecosystem affect populations of plants, animals, and people. California has a long history of drought. Drought comes, drought goes, but more often than not, we're in some level of drought because we are having less water than we actually need. Here is a map that was released yesterday of California's situation with rainfall and drought. Most of the state is in some level of drought, but there are even parts of the state that are in extreme levels of drought. This is one of the reasons why our wildfires are so extreme. We have so much dry fuel for them to burn. Dry fuel means bigger fires. The story of water in California isn't interesting. Basically, we don't have enough water for the things that we do. We are one of the largest agricultural producers, and yet we don't have rain during our main growing season. And so as we figured this out, we figured out ways to either store water or transport water from the places it was to the places we needed it. One of the biggest projects for this was the California Aqueduct. This starts out at a latitude right about even with San Francisco and runs south about 444 miles down south of Los Angeles. It's really a remarkable feat of engineering, and it wasn't cheap. Over $1 billion to build. Water inequality is a problem worldwide. We need people to think of solutions. The solutions aren't always easy. The solutions are often difficult and they're often expensive, but that doesn't mean that they're not solutions, and we need to think of them. The people that live in these places that have water inequality need you to think of solutions. So this is what I'm asking for you. I'm asking for you to think, what are some solutions that we can put into place to help the water shortages around the world? Check out these links to learn a little bit more about water and water inequality. Have a great day, guys.